Good morning and welcome to Morning Special, your morning energy. Good morning. I'm your special host today, Paul Matthews. Unfortunately, 최수진 선생님 has suddenly been taken ill, and so for today I'm here to cover her for this morning. And also our writer Jun Hee-jung will join me for today's edition of Morning Special. It's Friday, August 12th. Let's start with today's morning headlines. President Yoon Suk-yeol is slated to meet with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres today to discuss North Korea's nuclear program and other regional issues. Foreign ministers from the G7 nations have urged Russia to immediately hand back control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to Ukraine. A new study shows that if global greenhouse emissions remain high, the melting East Antarctica Ice Sheet, EAIS, could cause nearly half a meter of sea level rise by 2100. France is running out of its household staple, Dijon mustard, partly due to a heat wave in Canada and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. For the first time, scientists have discovered what appears to be a very young Jupiter-sized exoplanet, 395 light-years from Earth. President Yoon Suk-yeol is slated to meet with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres today to discuss North Korea's nuclear program and other regional issues.
오늘 윤석열 대통령이 안토니우 구테흐스 유엔 사무총장과 만나 북핵 문제와 기타 지역 현안에 대해 논의할 예정입니다. 네, 어떤 배경인지 설명해 주실 수 있을까요?
Of course. Yes, so we have President Yoon Suk-yeol meeting Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary-General, today. They're going to meet for lunch. And according to a press briefing, they're expected to discuss several important issues, including North Korea's nuclear program, Northeast Asian affairs, and preparations for the upcoming UN General Assembly in New York in September. Antonio Guterres arrived yesterday here in Korea. He was accompanied by key UN officials, including Under-Secretary-General for Disarmament Affairs, Izumi Nakamitsu. Today is his second and last day in Korea, and actually it's his first visit in 4 years. He was last here in 2018 for the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. This is not the first time the two have spoken. President Yoon received a phone call from Antonio Guterres back in June when he called him to congratulate him on his inauguration as president. And I have to say, I was very touched by remarks that Antonio Guterres made earlier this week. He was in Mongolia, and he spoke about the flooding here in Korea and the tragic accidents and deaths that we've suffered, and he expressed deep solidarity with Koreans and the Korean government.
그런 얘기들을 했었군요.
네.
네. 홍수에 대해서 상당히 깊이 애도를 하는 그런 마음들을 표현을 해주셨군요. 네,
네.
알겠습니다. 저희 표현 한번 살펴볼게요.
Yes, so there's an interesting expression here. President Yoon Suk-yeol is slated to meet with Antonio Guterres.
네.
So here, if we're slated to do something, it means it's on the slate. It's on the schedule.
Slate.
It's a different kind of slate. My father, when he was at school, sometimes they would use pen and paper, but sometimes they would use a piece of slate. So slate is a kind of rock, and you can cut it very thin, almost like a sheet of paper, and then write on it with chalk. So you would have a slate up on the wall, for example, with today's menu or today's schedule. So when we talk about something being slated to happen, it means it's on the slate, meaning it's on the list to do.
Right. 그럼 저희가 이렇게 식당 같은 데 가면 오늘의 메뉴 이런
네.
것들이 올라와 있으면서 오늘은 이런 메뉴들이 있습니다라는 거기에서 유래된 표현이라는 말씀이시죠?
Yeah, the menu's on the slate.
네. 맞습니다. 그래서 오늘 be slated to 이거 예정되다, 예정이다라는 표현으로 쓰실 수 있습니다.
Yes,
네.
and talking of Antonio Guterres, How do you explain the UN Secretary-General in Korean? What's the official Korean term?
UN 사무총장이라고 저희는 얘기를 하는데요.
Okay, let's read the headline one more time. President Yoon Suk-yeol is slated to meet with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres today to discuss North Korea's nuclear program and other regional issues.
네, 계속해서 두 번째 헤드라인 살펴보겠습니다.
Foreign ministers from the G7 nations have urged Russia to immediately hand back control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to Ukraine.
주요 7개국 외무장관들은 러시아가 자포리자 원전에 대한 통제권을 우크라이나에 돌려줄 것을 촉구했습니다. 배경 설명 부탁드려도 될까요?
Yeah, we have a very strong statement from the foreign ministers of the G7 nations. They've accused Russia of putting the entire region in danger, and they've also said they were profoundly concerned over the serious threat to safety at the nuclear plant. This also comes on the back of a statement by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, which is the UN's watchdog for nuclear safety, and they called for an end to all military activities that endanger nuclear security. We also have the G7 stating that Russia's actions undermine the IAEA's ability to monitor the safety of nuclear activities in Ukraine. Russia, on the other hand, has accused Ukraine of creating artificial obstacles and difficulties to a potential IAE mission to the plant, and Russia also requested an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss the situation yesterday. Last week, we saw more shelling in the area around the plant and the surrounding areas. Russia and Ukraine blamed each other. And this week, the head of Ukraine's nuclear power operator actually said that around 500 Russian soldiers were at the site and they were using it as a nuclear shield.
네, 계속해서 헤드라인에 나온 주요 표현 살펴볼까요?
Yes, so here we have the G7 foreign ministers urging Russia to immediately hand back control. If we hand back something, we're giving it back. In this case, they want Russia to hand back control to Ukraine. But you can also hand back something to somebody. For example, if you lend me a pencil and I use the pencil, but then you need it again, you could say, Paul, can you hand me back the pencil you borrowed?
네, 여기서 핸드백 돌려주다. 라는 되돌려주다라는 표현으로 사용을 했어요. 그래서 immediately hand back control이라고 하면 즉시 통제권을 돌려주다라고 해주시면 됩니다. 자, 계속 다시 한번 읽어주시겠습니까?
Foreign ministers from the G7 nations have urged Russia to immediately hand back control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to Ukraine. Let's move on to the third headline. A new study shows that if global greenhouse emissions remain high, the melting East Antarctica Ice Sheet, EAIS, could cause nearly half a meter of sea level rise by 2100.
지구온난화 배출량이 높게 유지된다면 남극대륙동부빙상이 녹아 2100년에는 0.5m의 해수면 상승이 일어날 수 있다는 연구 결과가 나왔습니다.
Yes, so this is a new analysis of this vast ice sheet. The EAIS is massive. And this analysis shows if global heating is limited to 2 degrees, then the EAIS can remain stable. But if the climate crisis drives temperatures higher, then we could see the melting of that ice sheet, and that could raise the sea level by many, many meters. The problem is the EAIS, the East Antarctic Ice Sheet, it holds the vast majority of Earth's glacier ice. It's much bigger than the West Antarctic Ice Sheet, for example. If the West Antarctic Ice Sheet were to melt, the sea level would rise by 5 meters. In contrast, if the EAIS melts completely, sea levels would rise by 52 meters. It's a shocking, shocking rise that would cause devastation. Just a few meters of rising sea levels would basically redraw the world's map. And for those living in coastal cities like New York or Shanghai, well, it's hard to imagine what life would be like, and we might see some cities, in fact, disappear if that were to happen. The good news is, though, according to the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, which many countries have agreed to, we need to limit global heating to 2 degrees. So that's on path. That's what we should be doing. If so, then the EAIS will only rise by 0.5 sea level meters by 2300, which would be very good for us. However, the scientist who leads the study, Professor Chris Stokes, says it's very much in our hands and we should not wake this sleeping giant, meaning this wonderful, beautiful ice sheet. If we misbehave, if we cause the climate to change too much, we could really endanger ourselves.
네, 지금 막 EIS is very much in our hands라는 표현 해주셨는데요. 이거 우리 손에 달려있다 이런 표현이겠죠. 네, 그리고 또 East Antarctica Ice Sheet, 네, 남극대륙동부빙상이라는 표현인데요. 네,
Yes, so it's for me, it's the first time hearing this term, the EAIS, but now I've heard of it. It makes me worry a little bit about the climate crisis, and we need to do a lot more.
맞습니다.
One thing we should probably talk about is the term sea level. If you're not aware, when we talk about the sea level, it's how much the oceans are rising, and we're seeing rising sea levels more than ever before.
네, 여기에서 sea level이라는 표현 폴 선생님께서 또 써주셨는데요. 해수면이라는 표현이 되겠습니다. 네, 다시 한번 헤드라인 읽어주시겠어요?
A new study shows that if global greenhouse emissions remain high, the melting East Antarctica Ice Sheet, EAIS, could cause nearly half a meter of sea level rise by 2100.
네, 계속해서 네 번째 헤드라인 가보겠습니다.
France is running out of its household staple, Dijon mustard, partly due to a heat wave in Canada and Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
프랑스의 국민 양념 디종 머스터드가 캐나다의 폭염과 러시아의 우크라이나 침공으로 인해 품귀 현상을 빚고 있습니다. 네, 좀 더 자세한 설명해 주시겠어요?
Korea cannot live without gochujang, and France cannot live without mustard. As it's known in France, Dijon moutarde. It's been in short supply for a while, and that means we've had store shelves empty and many French consumers frustrated that they can't get their hands on this important ingredient. For them, it's getting harder to make their salad vinaigrettes, which often contain this mustard, fresh mayonnaise, which needs that spice of the mustard, or even the duck confit, which France is famous for. It's not the same without some Dijon mustard. So it's all because of, 3 things coming together. One, we had a heat wave, and that resulted in crop damage in 2021 in Canada. And Canada usually supplies France with its mustard seeds. In fact, 80% of mustard seeds come from Canada usually. However, this past year, no mustard seeds. So where do we go? Ukraine. The issue being, Ukraine has been invaded by Russia, and so the alternative supply has been cut off. And this means French consumers have been in a little bit of a panic. They have been stockpiling mustard, which means if you're slow off the mark, you're not going to get that jar of mustard because someone else has taken it before you. And so actually suppliers have imposed quotas on retailers, on shops, because they don't want them to completely run out and they don't want them to stockpile. They want a continuous supply of mustard if possible. The head of the French Mustard Association says it's going to improve from November and that in 2023, when the Canadian harvest is delivered, things will be much, much better. However, others in the industry are speculating that the situation is going to remain tight until 2024. And so, French consumers are hunting for mustard. They have to say there's a lot of solidarity going on. If you look at social media, there are consumers who are sharing locations of stores where mustard has come in, or they're sharing recipes of how to make a mustard dish without the mustard.
네, 저희 한국 사람들이 고추장 없이 밥을 먹는, 그리고 김치가 없이 밥을 먹는 그런 상황이 지금 프랑스에서 일어나고 있다고 말씀을 해주셨는데요. 이 기후변화가 정말 우리 생활 곳곳에 너무 많은 영향을 미치는 것 같습니다. 네, 헤드라인에 나오는 주요 표현 잠깐 설명해 주실까요? 먼저 household staple이라는 표현이 나왔어요.
Yes, we're not talking about stationery. We have the stapler when
Yes.
we staple something, which is when we attach that little metal pin to the paper to keep the pages together. This is a different kind of staple. Here, a staple is something that we need every day. We often use it when referring to foods. For example, in Korea, rice and kimchi. These are two of the main staples of the Korean diet. In the UK, it's bread and potatoes. In Italy, it might be spaghetti. In France, well, it's mustard. It's something they have on the dinner table every single day.
네, 여기에서 폴 선생님이 something we need every day라는 표현을 써주셨어요. staple, 즉 필수품이라는 얘기죠. 그래서 household staple 하시면 가정의 필수품. 우리가 집에서 사용할 때 매일같이 필요한 네, 필수품을 얘기해 주셨습니다. 계속해서 디종 머스터드가 어떤 머스타드인지 조금 더 설명을 해 주실 수 있을까요?
It first came about in 1856, and we should say there are many kinds of mustard. There's English mustard, there's French mustard. They're all made in different ways, but Dijon mustard has become a favorite for French households. It comes from the Burgundy region, and here we have a mixture of mustard seeds plus herbs plus white wine to create this slightly tangy, spicy, delicious condiment that goes well with everything.
네, 지금 허브와 화이트 와인을 섞어서 이렇게 톡 쏘는 되게 맛있는 그런 맛을 낼 수 있다는 그런 얘기를 해주셨는데요. 저 끝맛이 특히나 부드럽다고 네 그렇게 들었습니다. 네, 한 번 더 헤드라인 읽어주시겠어요?
France is running out of its household staple Dijon mustard, partly due to a heat wave in Canada and Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
네, 계속해서 오늘 마지막 헤드라인 살펴보도록 하겠습니다.
For the first time, scientists have discovered what appears to be a very young Jupiter-sized exoplanet, 395 light-years from Earth.
지구로부터 395광년 떨어진 목성 크기의 아기 외계 행성이 처음으로 발견됐습니다. 좀 더 자세한 설명 부탁드릴게요.
For 30 years or so, astronomers have been looking outside of the solar system, and they've discovered 5,000 of these exoplanets. They're searching for what might be out there, what might exist. And this time, they have compelling evidence they've discovered one of the youngest planets they've ever found. It's only 1.5 million years old. In human terms, that's a lot, but in planets, that's a very, very young planet. They're basically comparing it to a newborn baby with these building blocks of gas and dust coming together. So they need to observe further. They need further observations to confirm its existence. But if it is really what they think it is, then maybe we can better understand how our planet was made, for example. What's really interesting is the way they discovered it was using the Atacam Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array. It's known as ALMA. This is in Chile. And what they have is 66 antennas. And these antennas work in unison. They work together to get whatever image or whatever picture they can from outside the solar system. What's interesting, though, with this exoplanet is really, really far from its star. If we think of our solar system, our furthest planet is Neptune, and that's 2.8 billion miles from the Sun. This planet is 19 billion miles from its star. It's quite unusual, quite extraordinary. The good news is we have the James Webb Space Telescope, which recently started operations. They're going to be using that to get a more detailed portrait of this very, very young world. And hopefully we'll get some more answers as to what's out there.
네, 정말 제임스 웹 스페이스 텔레스콥이 만들어지면서 더 많은 우주의 비밀들을 하나씩 풀어나가고 있는 것 같습니다. 헤드라인에 나오는 주요 표현 한번 살펴볼게요. 먼저 exoplanet.
Yes, nothing to do with the pop group EXO, but it is exoplanet. Exo meaning outside of. So we have planets in our solar system. We think of Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and so on. An exoplanet is outside our solar system. So that's why it's an exoplanet.
네, 지금 엑소라는 표현 자체가 밖에 있다라고 지금 짚어주셨는데요. 그래서 엑소플래닛이라고 하면은 우리가 살고 있는 우리 태양계 밖에 있는 행성, 즉 외계의 행성을 얘기하는군요. 네, 계속해서 395 light years from Earth 이 부분 한번 설명해 주시겠어요?
Yeah, this is where we have to get very technical. This term, a light year, is the amount of time it takes for light to travel, which is a very long way. It's trillions of miles, I believe. So it's we're talking trillions of kilometers to get to this planet. It would take us a very, very long time to get there. But thanks to the technology we have, we can actually see it through our telescopes.
아, 네, 지금 395광년이 정말 많이 떨어진 곳이라고 지금 설명을 해주셨는데요. 여기에서 광년, light years라고 저희는 표현을 합니다. 네, 지금까지 뉴스캐스터 폴과 함께 하기 전에 헤드라인 한 번 더 읽어주시겠어요?
Thank you. For the first time, scientists have discovered what appears to be a very young Jupiter-sized exoplanet, 395 light years from Earth.
네, 지금까지 뉴스캐스터 폴과 함께 오늘의 헤드라인 자세히 들려드렸습니다.